time slowed down to frame by frame. And up above, this car was coming down and going to land in my lap. And I saw the guy that was in it, face distorted because he was screaming, filled with fear. And I realized it's going to crash the roof in, my neck's going to snap, and that's it, I'm dead. It felt like I was the pinball in a pinball machine, and I was projected forward through the tunnel. Everything just resumed. Oh my God, I almost just died. Oh my God, I should have been dead. And I'm looking around everywhere around me. No cars on the road during rush hour. Oh my God, am I dead?
Nicole, thank you so much for joining me.
Melissa, thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Of course. You've had a lifetime of interesting spiritual experiences, to say the least. So maybe we could start with the first profound spiritual experience you had.
Well, maybe I'll share something that I haven't yet on the podcast. So when I was young, like really, really young, I watched the stars dance. The lights would move, and I felt like I had whole conversations with people, beings, or whatever you want to say. And I was just so young that it was just something that would happen. And I'd watch the stars do all these like crazy things, which, moving forward and growing up, and more like UFOs or ships, spacecraft, whatever you want to call it. And I felt like I would communicate with cosmic family out there. So I'd always be looking at, why am I here? And just asking a lot of questions from a very young age. And I felt like while I was growing up that my life was so boring. And fast forward to my adulthood, I look back and say, wow, the experiences that I've had and those very connected with cosmic beings, and also the intuitive nature that I grew up with, wasn't boring at all. So that's where it all began, was a very, very young age, as far back as I can remember. And I have memories back since, one of my friends he's a videographer, and he's done a documentary series for Slatersville, Rhode Island, which is part of the town I grew up in. And he was doing some documentary pieces on Stamina Mills. And my grandmother worked there. And I remember being in there. I still remember the smells and the sounds and like all the textile spools and everything, what it looked like, what it sounded like, what it felt like, what it smelled like. And we were talking about it, and he's like, Nicole, you had to have been, 6 months old at that point. He's like, how can you possibly remember that? I said, I don't know. I just remember all of that in very much detail because that mill had burned down. So there was only a certain amount of time between being born in April of 1975 and it burning down.
So it sounds, from what you're saying, like, first of all, you have a really strong memory of that early part of your life. And it almost sounds like you had two separate lives, like the life in the physical plane that was boring, and then the life in the spiritual plane that was so interesting.
Yeah. And there were definitely these astral projections and astral realm walking that happened constantly. And it was really interesting with some of the different things that would happen and the things that I would see. I would have very, very vivid recollections of those places.
Wow. Are you able to share what any of those places were that you saw?
Oh, sure. When I was super young. So some of the things that when you go into that astral place, there's, it can be a little bit frightening. And I think that it seems frightening because when you enter into that astral place, if you have fears, they come up, and they come up for you to recognize and be aware of and just work through them. So I felt like I have these instances where everything is black. So I can't see anything. I can hear and I can sense and feel things. So it was one of those instances where it was completely black. And I was probably about 6 or 7 years old when I had this happen. And I felt like how I described it, I remember describing it as, from the limited mind of a child and child experiences trying to articulate something that really can't be articulated with our words. But I kept hearing all these screams, like screams and cries and moans from what seemed like a whole slew of children. And it was like they were hungry. And I was saying that it was like they were really hungry, like starving kind of hungry. And I was the one who had the boxes of pizza. And everybody was crying because they wanted that and they needed that. And I didn't know where to go and I didn't know how to reach them. And it was like, like a hell realm, I guess you could say. And just those cries. And that like stuck with me for a very, very long time. And when I remember these, it's like it happened yesterday. I can remember everything about it. Other times it was, I would just, astral project and fly around in the neighborhood and meet up with other people. And it's kind of funny because when I got married, I was talking to my husband at the time and I was mentioning that I used to do this. And he was like, wait a minute, that was you? Because we would meet up and just like, it was like kids playing and just in a different realm. And, there's just a lot of things that we can tap into intuitively and energetically that we don't need to be there physically, but we're there that people don't realize.
Wow, that's amazing. So you met up with your husband as when you were kids playing in the astral realm? And then did you meet later in real life or did you know each other as kids here?
We met each other in high school. So.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you have any thoughts on what that hellish realm was and why places like that exist?
I think a good way to describe it is those realms are there because people believe that they are there and we create our own little boxes of hell. And what I've noticed that kind of reminds me of those hell realms is later in life, I've dealt with a lot of people who were in passing and in hospice care and in nursing homes and things like that. And when our minds start to go, the different things, the beliefs that we have come up and we start playing those out. It's almost like a recording. And it reminds me of those hell realms because people are, and I'm not going to say that it doesn't exist because it exists in your mind. And whatever it is that you are creating, you create your heaven or hell. And I've watched people go through hospice care and start with the whole dementia and then watching them either go in the track of, oh my gosh, everything is so beautiful. And they see beautiful things and beautiful colors and lights and angels and fairies and animals, depending on their personality and what they believed. If they believed in like love, and really tapped into that love vibration and caring and being empathic about other people and themselves, that plays out. And then quite the opposite plays out when people go through that dementia state and they've had a lot of limiting beliefs, a lot of cynical beliefs, distrust, and all of that. That's when you see people saying, they're not going to take their medicine, they're not going to eat, they're not going to drink, you're trying to kill me, all this stuff that isn't true with the people that are trying to help them through their hospice time. And there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of anguish and there's a lot of they act very mean towards other people because all of these beliefs are now on a script playing themselves out. So I was talking to one of my friends a couple months ago anyway, and saying, I'm so glad I do the work that I do and I'm where I am, because what the heck is actually going on with our end of time in our lives here is I don't want to be one of those people that is, bringing my kids through a hard time because all these scripts are playing out. I want to be one of those people that recognizes that, here we are and it's a beautiful transition. And when it's time to go and move on.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights from your experience helping people transition. And that hits me a little differently, I guess, because I was raised in a religion where I was taught that about heaven and hell, that you had to have the correct religious beliefs and that would determine whether you went to heaven or hell. And it sounds like you're saying there is some truth to the fact that our beliefs can influence whether we enter a heavenly or hellish realm, but it has more to do with how our beliefs affect our state of consciousness. Would that be correct?
Yes, absolutely. And if you look at, I was raised in a very Christian household. And so if you look at the Bible and the teachings that it has, look at the teachings on the mindset and the beliefs and how to get into higher consciousness states. There's a lot of great teachings in there that if you look at it in that regards versus that if you don't believe in God, you're going to hell kind of thing, that gets interpreted or misinterpreted in various ways and instills the negative belief pattern, right? Because there's a lot of fear that comes from that. And the whole point is, if you look at different scriptures, it's about being not fearful, being courageous in your faith and your faith in yourself and in your faith in God or energy, the universe, however you want to put it. There's a lot of great things in there that state what to do to get to those higher consciousness spaces within yourself.
Right. Yeah, I was just listening to someone speak yesterday about interpreting the Bible through more of a metaphorical lens, and that there is truth in there, but it's often not, you can't get it necessarily through a literal reading.
Yes. And as far as the original texts and there's also a lot of cultural and verbiage differences in meanings and definitions of words and in their specific languages as well, in their cultural time frame. So all of that stuff needs to be taken into consideration as well. So it's a little bit difficult over time. I mean, even look at just generations where the slang of kids, if you go back to, a few generations ago, what the slang was then and what the slang is now, those are two totally different languages.
Right. Oh, it's so funny that you bring that up, because my daughter's 12 and her generation has this whole new list. We were going through the list of slang words that her generation uses, and I only knew a couple of them. So I have to get educated now.
Oh yeah, I'm there with you. My daughter's 14 going on 15 soon. And I'm like, what are you saying? What does that mean? And they all giggle and laugh and your mom doesn't know what that means. I'm like, yeah, I'm old. Okay.
So funny.
Yeah.
So Nicole, one of the experiences that you had was the blue light room. Could you share that one with us?
Oh yeah, sure. Oh gosh, I almost forgot about that. It was a while ago. There was a period of time where it felt like in the night, because a lot of times in the night, that's when I go out astrally. And there are some times where I will just hover above my body in an astral state. I think I get a much more restful sleep that way. And I get to monitor what happens in the house. Sometimes if there are things going on, I can hear and feel and see who's moving around in the house without having to get up.
That's convenient.
Yeah, it is. So it was during a time, I'm going to say it had to have been maybe about a decade ago, that I was going through this period of when I went to sleep, I would be only way that I can really describe it is that it felt like I was taken off on these missions, and they were like missions to like training missions. And that's what it felt like. It was all training. And I kept feeling like inside the quote unquote dream or whatever that was happening on that other realm, it felt like I would be going through like obstacle courses, and I had to get it right before I can move on to this next, whatever it was, the next phase or next mission, like training or whatever. And one of these was I was brought into this blue light room, and it was a very like electric blue, a very particular shade of blue that wasn't really a shade that you can really find here. So it was very electric, and that's the best color that I can describe as our version is this electric blue. And the whole room was that. And there was just a lot of stuff that was going on, and a lot of downloads and information and these training things. And just, there was a lot of information that doesn't always transfer to our verbal language.
Interesting. Do you think that you were like receiving information on a deeper level that you would need to perform your role on Earth or something like that, but you didn't necessarily comprehend it with your mind?
Yeah, there have been a bunch of what I can call downloads that have happened that are in that space of, let's see, this happened to me during surgery this past June in 2023. And so the downloads come in, and it's almost like this huge rush of information. Like if you had 15 people telling you all kinds of things of what to remember, what to do in certain instances, and just information that you didn't previously have knowledge of before, just yelling it all at you at once. Yeah. It's overwhelming to try to remember it all, right? Or if I took a book and there was all pictures and I just kind of like opened it and flashed them all, you would get images of those pictures, just flashes of those, and not really comprehend the full picture. But subconsciously, you're getting all of the information, right? So it feels like that there's all these pieces that come in, and you're just getting bits and pieces of it. And the bits and pieces that you get are significant in unlocking the rest of it. Because it's almost like you remember something, and then it opens up the rest of the information that you need in the time that you need it. Because if you were to know it all in that instant, your brain would like blow up. That's what it feels like. So I feel like there's this energy of, here's what you can absorb right now, and then the rest unlocks when you need it. And some of it is just meant to be on that subconscious level, because that's just almost like background scripts, if you will. Like in a software, you have background scripts that say, here's what to do when this happens. And it's not something that you actually have to think about. It'll just happen.
That makes so much sense. And I have had moments in my life where that's happened to me, where I'll see the most random thing, and all of a sudden this huge download, like this memory of something that I knew that I was supposed to be doing here, will just come to me in that moment. And apparently I wasn't supposed to know it up to that point. But like you said, we get it when we're supposed to.
Right. Because it's almost like if you knew it before that point came, it's just taking up space for no reason, energy and space in your person, in your psyche, and, in your brain. You don't need to know until it happens.
So Nicole, you've been astral projecting for your entire life, it sounds like. Is this something that happens to you spontaneously, or is there a process you go through to get out of your body?
It used to happen spontaneously when I was young, and I didn't know. Like, it's so funny looking back at how our brains process things, or how we try to articulate things when we're children, because it would just happen automatically, and I didn't know what it was. I used to call it the tornado would suck me out of my body. And because it was that whirring, that vibration that would happen because the pineal is being stimulated. And then the vibration in the body, it feels like this, whirring sound and all the vibrational stuff that's happening within the body. And then when you come out, there's like a rolling out that happens. At least that's how it was for me. And all of that stuff together, it felt like just this like tornado would just kind of go and pull me out. And then I was out and just doing whatever. So there was an issue with me understanding what happens when that was going on. Like, what does that mean? Because I didn't have the support in my family, and it was, I was very demonized in my life for some of these things because it wasn't really understood what was happening or that it was a good thing because of the religious beliefs, which is fine. It helped mold me into who I am and the strength that I have to be authentic now, because I had to pretend I was, something else and be quiet and not tell people about these things because this isn't cool. This isn't good. This is not of God. And I understood it completely different inside, innately to myself. So now there was a point where my mom had found out and she would startle me out of any restful state. So it actually created a trauma that wouldn't allow me to relax. And it really created a very long insomnia trauma in me. And in order for me to get back so it kind of depleted my ability to do the astral projection because I would get very anxious and that would set in and I would snap back in. And if I snapped in really hard, it sends a signal through your whole central nervous system. And you're in a state of like anxiety that you can't really get out of for a little while. So I had to work out of that and recreate a process for myself to be able to do it again. So now it's really about being able to be relaxed and in that space of not in your mind, but like empty space and presence, full presence, and then staying in that space because it does get your physical body gets a little excited when you're ready to come out because there's that vibration can snap you out of it. So it's about being able to stay calm and not emotionally rileable.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Nicole. Would you like to share about your near-death experience?
Ooh, sure. It's like it happens again every single time I say it. So there's a lot of different things that were going on. And the experience was I was getting out of work later than usual. And I worked in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the time as a chemist. And I was getting out an hour late, which really put me into a bind on my commute because it would create turn an hour commute into anywhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours, depending on the traffic. So when I got out, I was heavy in that traffic. And there was so much that was going on that we were probably going maybe about 30 miles an hour. And there was some commotion that people were looking at, rubbernecking, as they say around here, at these cars that were down in a ditch. One of the cars was smoking, and I don't really like to pay attention to too much of those things that are going on because that's how accidents tend to happen. And when I saw that was happening, I just was like, okay, I'm just minding my own business. There's stuff going on down there. I recognize it. Okay. But then my attention was taken immediately to my direct left on the other side of the Jersey barriers, and time slowed down to a frame by frame. But my mind was racing with information. It was like it was on overdrive, analyzing, processing, having whole conversations. And I noticed this woman in her car, and her driver's side door was pushed in. she was swaying in very slow motion to the impact that had just happened to her. I saw her black curly hair in her face, so I couldn't see her face, but I did see literally like highlights in her hair where the sun was hitting these very specific spots, and it looked like this golden light that was in her hair. And just having a conversation saying, well, what happened to her, and why is her door smashed in, and where's the other car that hit her, because that's what it looks like, what happened. And in that moment, it felt like somebody pushed my face up to look up, and I looked in front of me, and up above, this car was coming down and going to land in my lap. And I saw the guy that was in it, and he was face distorted because he was screaming, and he was filled with fear, as you would be, because you're realizing that, oh gosh, like, this is it. And with him about to land right in my lap where my steering wheel was, our eyes kind of met for a slight moment. And I realized that, oh God, he's going to land in my lap. His car's going to move up and over on my car, and it's going to crash the roof in. My neck's going to snap, and that's it. I'm dead. So in that moment, I screamed, and I tried to duck down as much as I could, knowing that the roof was going to cave in and I was going to die. And when that happened, I had this moment of meeting with my kids and all the people that were really, really close to me. So it wasn't everybody in my life. It was just this handful of people super close to me. I sat down with every one of my kids and all those people. And it was like I had this whole conversation with them about, that's it. Like, it's time for me to move on kind of stuff, and how much I love them and this and that. When that was done, I remembered thinking, feeling, saying in, telepathic, energetic form, okay, I'm ready. And this peace and love just was filling me. And then everything went black. And when everything went black, it felt like I was the pinball in a pinball machine, and I was projected forward through the tunnel, and I could see all things flashing before me. And then all of a sudden, it was like this space of not being aware of anything, and then immediately coming back to, and it was like I was held underwater for a very long time. And this was right about where you're, that's it. And then somebody pulls you up out of the water, and you just go like this gasp. And I was holding my steering wheel, and I was gasping for air and thinking, oh my God, it was like everything just resumed. Oh my God, I almost just died. Oh my God, I should have been dead. And I'm looking around everywhere around me. No cars on the road during rush hour. Nothing before me, nothing behind me, nothing on the other side. And then I was like, oh my God, am I dead? And I see this one lone car coming up on the other side. And I'm thinking, here's my comic relief is, shit, what side of the highway am I on? Am I on the highway to heaven or highway to hell? What is actually happening? So what do you do when, when you're in a space where you don't know what to do? You call mom. And I did that. And it was the funniest conversation, but not, because she was like, oh my God, Nikki, I was just praying for you. I pray for you every morning, but for some reason, I just needed to pray for you right now. Blah, 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 blah. And she's going off. And I said, Mom, can you just shut up right now? Like, not to be rude, but can you just shut up right now? Because I'm so confused. And I need to know if I'm dead. And she's like, what? No, you're not dead. You're talking to me on the phone. What are you talking about? And I told her what happened. And she was just like, oh my God, you rode angel wings. And I said, well, I rode something. I said, it felt like it was a wormhole or something, but if you want to call it angel wings, that's fine. And definitely something happened that I cannot explain. So there's that was the experience, but there was definitely something significant that was happening before that experience. And I was really in this place of depression that spiraled into a longer term depression. And I was obsessed with thinking about all the ways that I could die every minute of every day. And I would fantasize about it. And then basically, whether it was me telling myself or, guardian angels or spirit guides or whatever you want to say, just constantly having this mantra of just hold on a little bit longer. These kids need you. Just hold on a little bit longer, just a little bit longer, just a little bit longer. And that's all I would say. I'd go through my entire day fantasizing about death and then saying just a little bit longer, hold on. And I feel like that was really it, where I invited that and I died in that dimension, projected through into another. And that's where everything really picked up. So that was the experience of the near death. However, it was everything that's happened in my life after that that is the real significance.
Okay, I love to hear about what happened afterwards, but I have one question about the experience. So before the accident, it was rush hour and there was this, it sounds like an accident that involved multiple cars. And you saw all the details, like the light in the woman's hair and everything. And then when you came back, there was nobody there. What is your understanding of what happened there and where did everybody go?
Yeah, good question. I was actually projected 2.5 miles away on the same highway. A year later, I found out through a friend who had changed jobs and she was at lunch with people. It was the year anniversary of that accident, that people were talking about that particular accident and how a guy hit a woman, went up over the Jersey barriers, landed on top of another woman's car, and they both died.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, what? So when she called me up, she said, I thought about you today and this is the most bizarre thing, but let me tell you the story. And when she told me that story, I was like, whoa, that's crazy because that's literally what happened. And yet I was also projected forward. So if that happened in another dimension, I was the one that died. I got projected into the other dimension where I was projected forward and okay, and somebody else died.
Wow, that's crazy.
Right? So if you this is a weird thing now where the listeners out there can get very confused because it's like, what actually happened? Well, both things happened because there are two different dimensions. Right? So, and coming through, that's where the tunnel was and why I came through and why I ended up 2.5 miles away and why there's nobody on the highway during rush hour traffic, because if I'm in a different dimension, that was what was happening that day or normal. There's no cars on the Massachusetts Turnpike at, 4:30, 5:00 at night.
So I don't know if there's even an answer to this, but do you think that you're still in that other dimension? Like, did you permanently switch timelines or something?
I think because I died in that timeline, that my consciousness is what gets projected into the other dimension for me to bring information and to carry out what is needed to be carried out in that other me's timeline.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you mentioned that the significant things have happened to you since you came back. Would you like to get into that and what happened after you came back from the near-death experience?
Yeah, sure. Because when that happens, that whole sense of that love vibration that kind of rips through. I mean, in those moments, I had felt that there were beings around. I felt that spirit was there and all of that stuff. And moving forward, I came back home. I remember walking through the door, and my second son was greeting me at the door. That's what he always did. And so he gives me this big hug, and it was 2 days before his third birthday, I think, third or fourth birthday. And I would just grab this kid and was like, oh my God, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. And in my mind, it was like, I love my life. I love you. I love everything about this. Like, I don't want to go anywhere. There was no more fantasizing about death or anything. It was just like this fervor for life. And my intuition was amplified to the max. That I was creeping myself out with all kinds of stuff, and the healing ability that was coming through, and the way that I could see energy was amplified so much, and the visions were so intense that there was a period of time where I kind of, I needed a lot of internal processing. And I did a lot of meditation, and there was a lot of journaling and documenting and all kinds of stuff, because I could see things on people and just like walk up to them and touch them, or not even touch them, and just dissolve the stuff that I would see, pain or sickness and things like that. So I have a lot of people that come to me for healing sessions because they can be very powerful. That shift it's not just an external shift. There's both there's an external holding of the vibrational rate, and also that internal shift within the person in being ready. So it can be very profound. I like to tell this one story because it's super impactful, and it's just one of those things where, so one of the things that had happened was I was setting out to do aura readings. So I read people's auric energies. And when I was setting up at this shop that my friend owned, this woman had come in and was talking about her nephew, who was like a baby. And every time she was so frustrated, and there was so much emotion and like disappointment and discouragement in her voice, that I was just listening to the whole thing because I was right in the same room. And I'm setting up so I don't see her, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, I can feel something. And so I went and I looked, and I saw, as she was saying, that her nephew will just look at her and just cry, like scream bloody murder kind of cry, and wouldn't let her go anywhere near him, won't let her pick him up, nothing. So she can't bond with her nephew. And when I looked at her, I saw the static energy over her shoulder, and I was like, okay, I can't not say anything. So I went up and apologized for, eavesdropping on their conversation, but I couldn't help but overhear. And then when I look, I see this energy and over that particular shoulder. And she said, oh my God, that's exactly where he looks. And then he starts crying. And I said, yeah, I can see why. And I asked if I could do a little bit of healing energy for her and, correct what was going on. And she said yes. And I just basically told her, because I work in like the quantum field and the torsion field energy space. And when I go in that way, I can trace energies through whether it's past lives or that life, and just smooth out that timeline. And when I did the work for her, I could see all these flashes of horrible, horrible things. And I couldn't say anything to her of what exactly I saw, because she had this very young girl with her. I think she was with her sister and her, like maybe a niece, or she was with a couple other people, and this little girl. And so I didn't want to say, and I told her that. I said, I can't really say with the company that we have what I see, but it's horrible. It was very brutal. It was very violent. It was extremely like sexual in nature as well, like very violent. So I worked through the energies on that. And then I said, may or may not feel a thing. And that's okay. It doesn't matter if you feel anything or not. And she said she didn't feel anything, which is why another reason why I like the story too, because she didn't feel anything. And she stood there and she said, well, how am I going to know? And I looked at her and I said, oh, you'll know. And I said, just go about your business and you'll know. And that was that. And I just went back to whatever. And I could tell that maybe she was kind of in that space of, okay, well, whatever, that may or may not work, but that just happened. And then 2 days later, I got a call from the shop owner who said that the sister had stopped back in and had said, I don't know what that girl did to my sister, but I need her to do whatever she did to me. And she said, I went to my sister's house with the baby and they had the best day ever. He immediately wanted her to pick him up. There was not one single cry episode. It was all smiles and laughs and bonding, and they had the best day. And that was the best thing to hear, because doing this work, you don't always hear about the wonderful things that tend to happen afterwards. And it was just so nice to hear that. That has to be one of my favorite stories.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Would you like to share a little bit more about your offerings and the work that you have available to people?
Oh, I would love to. Thank you for that, Melissa. I appreciate that. Yeah. There are a few things that I do. I do group coaching. I do one-on-one coaching. I do different one-on-one sessions, whether they're transformational sessions or healing sessions. So that's all available through my websites. And I do aura readings or aura parties. So I have a very unique way to do aura parties as well. And you get to have yours free if you host one. So people can find that stuff out on my website at www.magicllc.com, spelled as my last name, or some of the offerings are through my scheduling link, which is nicolemajik.as.me.
I'll have those links in the description. Are there any final messages that you'd like to share before we go?
I love sharing that everything that you have is within you, and it's just taking that action and committing to yourself. A lot of people don't know what they really desire, so understanding what it is that you do desire and aligning those things with your values to bring out the proper beliefs for you to attain the success that you desire is going to be super essential, and that's what I help people do.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Nicole.
Same here, Melissa. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for watching the Love Covered Life podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and comment with your thoughts and opinions, and check the description box for the links to my free community where I share lots of resources, my Pay What You Can community where we do classes and challenges together, my TikTok, Instagram, my Clips channel, and lovecoveredlife.com where I share my paintings. Thank you so much for your support.